Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens. A true legend has retired finally from. Oh, no, I don't like that. I'm trying to think of an interesting way of not being over the top to kind of discuss this.
Yeah. All right.
I think you know what? Make it not over the top. Just discussing the retirement of future Hall of Fame goaltender Martin Brodeur.
Something along the lines of we ordinarily record once a week, but
Yeah,
when one of the game's greats retires, you feel something along those lines.
there we
You
go.
feel
Perfect. All right, I'll go for it. Hey, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens. Usually, we only record this podcast once a week, but when someone the magnitude of Martin Brodeur finally hangs up the skates for the last time, we have to talk about it. Pat, I know you were able to get some sound and some really good bites just about the impact on the game that Martin Brodeur had. What did you get today?
I spoke with Lou Lamoriello on Tuesday, and he spelled out basically what now everyone knows to be true is that Martin Brodeur will retire. He'll join the Blues front office, and he likely will join the Devils front office next season. I went to the Devils morning skate Wednesday morning. Obviously they're hosting the Maple Leafs Wednesday night, and a bunch of guys addressed a bunch of players and management addressed the um, Brodeur's retirement, the announcement of Brodeur's retirement, and I spoke with Lou Lamoriello, Devils president, general manager, and interim head coach, and David Clarkson, formerly of the Devils, currently of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who had this to say.
Definitely some excellent bites from them. Just talk about the impact. Obviously, a player like him is not only generational, but just within the lore of the game forever. I mean, we could sit here and go over the stats, but that would be a little much. Pat, if you can kind of look at the legacy of him, if you can sum it up in a few words, what really strikes you about the legendary career of Martin Brodeur?
I think what's ironic in some ways about it is how little he was actually praised during his career. I mean, the people around here, people in New Jersey and Devils fans in general, love to harp on the fact that Brodeur is among the more underappreciated athletes in our area. Barry Melrose had a quip back in maybe I think it was 2003 when he said that Brodeur had been in the finals 4 times and had never been perceived as the better goalie in any of those finals, despite having won 3 of them. And all the trips, all the trophies, 4 Vezina trophies, 10 All Stars, the most wins out of everyone in goaltending or any goaltender in NHL history, more shutouts than any goaltender in NHL history, more minutes, more shots faced. And what's interesting is that what resonated around the Devils dressing room today was a quote from Jaromir Jagr from yesterday actually, is that Brodeur may be this great, remembered as this great goaltender who played in a perfect system, but just how athletic he was and just how remarkable he was at the position as a defender, basically as a third or a half defenseman back there. The perception that they changed the rules, they added the trapezoid for Brodeur because of his stellar puck playing and puck possession game. He scored 3 goals, which, I mean, one of them was a playoff goal against the Montreal Canadiens. 2 other ones where he was just the last player to touch the puck and happened to be credited with those goals. But I think you watch a guy with just the consistency and just day in and day out, year in and year out, you just expected Martin Brodeur to be the Devils' netminder, almost in the same way you expected Derek Jeter to be the Yankee shortstop, or Tom Brady to be the New England Patriots quarterback, or it's almost like you slot that guy in there and you slotted him for 40 wins and you slotted the Devils for a playoff berth every year. And it was weird seeing him in the St. Louis Blues uniform. Even if it was on TV or he made that appearance on Long Island. But I mean, it's safe to say that he'll always be a Devil, even this little Blues tenure aside. He'll always be a Devil. Dave, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think being the Devils GM is something that will probably be in his future. Maybe not 2 years, might take a little longer for Lou to leave, but I think he will be a GM. But I think the interesting thing about him, the point you made that he was never perceived to be the best goaltender in all these, and I feel like the fact that he played in New Jersey, where A, it's a small market, and B, you have Lou Lamoriello, who always felt that the advertising for the team should not be about a single player, it should be about the team, that he never even got a chance to be as big in his own market as he possibly could have. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
I actually went up there to a game last year in Montreal, his hometown, and I did wear a Martin Brodeur jersey, and people were always had nice things to say. A couple Maple Leafs fans who weren't exactly happy, but he's generally loved up there. But as far as the rest of the league goes, I think there might have been a little jealousy because he
Mm-hmm.
was so good and he played on so many good teams, and that in a sense the Devils were looked at, oh well, they don't deserve to have a great team or a great goaltender like that because they weren't the Rangers or anything like they're the boss, and they weren't an original six team. And to me, that's the interesting thing is that he had this amazing career, much unlike a guy like Tom Brady, Derek Jeter, which he is certainly in the class of, where he played his career in a much smaller market where if you wanted to equate his career to those two guys, he's absolutely right there. But are they doing feature after feature on him on SportsCenter? I know it's hockey and that doesn't work, but it just perceived very differently,
Mm-hmm.
which of course he deserves much more. I really do believe.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I think there's also, I mean, I believe that you're right. There probably was some jealousy around the league, certainly considering you're playing in the shadow of the original six Rangers and in the with rivals such as the Philadelphia Flyers and the Pittsburgh Penguins throughout the years in that Atlantic Division. But there were some moments for Marty where he showed he was human. I mean, he had the whole marital infidelity and people still harp on that. There was the perception that he was a whiner, that with the Avery thing, with the some of the goalie or the referee. He's such an in tune and in check athlete, one who is not afraid to speak his mind. And you heard Lou say that he's a player that, or an athlete that has such great self-awareness, but also self-confidence, that I think more recently it became easy. He became a little bit easier fodder, especially as through the rise of a Henrik Lundqvist in the Rangers. The Devils and Rangers, you almost can't measure the two except against each other. And the Rangers have been in the lead basically since Lundqvist came into the league. It's despite what the playoff series in the Eastern Conference Final in 2012 says, the Rangers have been in the playoffs more. The Rangers have been to the final. They've both been to the final the same number of times. Obviously, they both lost in the final. But Lundqvist has this perception as being the guy now, and Brodeur kind of took a back seat to that because his play fell off substantially. It became a little bit easier to take shots at Marty. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's fair, because the guy had a spectacular career. I mean, there's not too many goaltenders who lived. I mean, think about the time in which Brodeur played. He played for 10 years where there was no 3-point games, where there were ties, where he probably lost a ton of wins to that format, and still, you listen to goalies around the league talk about he has these shutouts, and these the win records are likely not going to ever be touched. And it's pretty remarkable to think that he played the first half of his career basically where he could tie games, like the scoreless tie he had with Nakashik. He shared a scoreless tie with Henrik Lundqvist. So I think it's pretty remarkable that but at the same time, Brodeur opened himself up to this with the play. Lou Lamoriello told me yesterday that the Devils couldn't have had him back. They had moved on with the addition of Corey Schneider, and that it was Brodeur's prerogative to go try and find a team, and he found a team for 7 games, the Blues. He did also take us back, as most elite athletes do, on their swan song. He had that moment where he pitched the shutout against the Avalanche But there were some human elements to Marty Brodeur. He was a little ornery last year. I was around the Devils a lot last year, and he had some moments where he seemed a little bit frustrated or a little bit burnt or a little bit taken aback by the whole thing. But none of that can take away with what the career he had.
No, and just to touch on it real quick, I think as an athlete, as a prideful athlete who really, I'm sure, believed he was the best for all the years he played, it's got to be hard to see your skills eroding and know that you're not quite what you used to be, of course. But to me, the things that stand out about him, the Vezina, there's of course one of the knocks on him is that he had a great defense. He had Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermayer. He won Vezinas in 07 and 08. What can you say about that? And to me,
Yeah.
you look at the trapezoid, which certainly you can't blame all of it on him, but the fact that that exists is a lot of because of Martin Brodeur. Even the fact that he played that hybrid style well into the realm where now you see all the guys being butterfly, where you think, there's saves that he made that other goaltenders wouldn't because they're too quick to go to their knees.
Mm-hmm.
I know he changed the game. Whatever you want to say about where his final stats end up and maybe his save percentage dipping a little bit because of the last couple of years, but there's no doubt that he really did change that. Pat, is there one moment, maybe it was talking to him, watching him play, is there one moment that really stands out to you about him as a person or on the ice as well?
I think what I would say with Brodeur is his awareness of the league at whole. And you hear Lou talk about he's a student of the game. And you mentioned the hybrid style he played, which basically was the nod back to the stand-up, but also had the butterfly elements to it. And it's interesting because that's you still don't see you kind of figured that maybe that some of that style would come in as you see, you saw people learn to play the butterfly just as Patrick Roy did in the 80s, and it kind of filtered in that era of butterfly. But I think his just his awareness of things happening in the league. He was in tune, very checked in to the league. And, you hear people talk about he would bait shooters into it, whether it was a shootout, whether it was a breakaway, whether it was shooting from the outside or whatever. He would show spots and then take them away better than most better than most goaltenders ever could have. You mentioned he'd have that stand-up element where he'd be up and then all of a sudden he'd show that arm and body spot or the 5-hole or whatever, and then he would take it away and make a save, and leaving these shooters just frustrated because he knew shooters' tendencies better than most other goaltenders. A lot of goaltending is reactionary and positioning, whereas Brodeur was more of, yes, he had the positioning elements, but also that he was so checked in and so knowledgeable of tendencies and of what players like to do and what players were which handed shots and where they like to shoot from and how they like to shoot, that it was hard to fool him. I mean, there were moments, obviously, where he obviously surrendered goals and he obviously gave up some bad ones later in his career. But just that knowledge, and that's what Lou Lamoriello said Wednesday about why he thinks Brodeur will be such a great executive, because he's such a student and he continues to progress.
Absolutely.
Dave, what about you?
Yeah, just to finish on your point there, I absolutely agree that for him, just the way he approached the game itself will make him a great front office guy, but also the fact that he was with the Devils and he saw the way that Lou built a team and that they were a perennial playoff contender every year. I think that's all going to help him. But for me, the moment I think that stands out, there's a couple. One of them was I was in the Devils dressing room, I think a day or two after Dennis Brodeur, his father, passed away last year. And what struck me was that the way he conducted that interview was almost about the way that he was able to shake off a goal. You knew he was hurting inside. He was very close with his father, but the way that he had a smile on his face and he spoke so fondly of him, you could see, to me, that's how he was able to give up a bad goal and shake it off. That he has this mentality and the way that he can kind of just put his emotions in check for a little bit, and that's such an important part. I mean, look, you see Marc-Andre Fleury have to skate into the corner all the time, and to me, that's what made him great, was that he was able to kind of get through all of it, have the rough games, and just still keep soldiering on and playing so many minutes each season. But another one which really will kind of go back is I was a kid. I think I was 6 years old. And my dad was the team photographer for the Devils, and I got to meet Marty. And he was a young kid too. I mean, much younger than we are now.
Yeah.
And I think it was the '94-'95 season.
Mm-hmm.
And he spent, and of course, I'm hanging out, getting to meet all the players, and Marty comes off, and of course, I was a big fan. And he actually spent some time, really got to talk to me. Of course, just a little kid, but because his father and my father were close, both being photographers, and it was just interesting, and just how appreciative he was of my father, who shared the craft of his father, and that in turn he spent the time with me. I mean, he was a class act. Of course, there's as you said, there's some days where he got a little angry, but on and off the ice, he was classy. Other than, of course, the moments with Sean Avery and stuff like that. But I think when we look at it, we can't look at those moments because overall his career was just so astounding. It would take someone, I think 20 years of averaging 34.5 wins to try to get his win total.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. I'm sorry, but it's not.
Yeah, especially in this day where, goalies don't play back-to-backs and the backup goaltender is so important. You see, Marty used to play 70-plus games per night, and I think what was really interesting from that I can look back on now, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Dave, is just how you watched him grow up. You see him as a young player. He was always, the loose, happy-go-lucky kid who shooting at empty nets and scoring goals and playing the puck early on in his day. But then he really matured and he really developed. And you hear guys, you hear Clarkson talk about his work ethic, and you really don't get a lot of that from the narratives that have come through the years. You just kind of figure. I mean, you hear a lot of people quip about his weight and joke about it. And he obviously you get old like the rest of us do, and you put on some weight. But it seemed like Brodeur's work habits. It sounds that from David Clarkson that his work habits never dissipated, even as his body started to fail him. It started in 08-09 with that injury that forced him out for several months, and then it seemed like he had injuries and hernias and other things that would keep him out of play. And that's just getting older. But that the work ethic was there. And the work ethic, we talk about being a student, and that's obviously part of it, but also the physical acumen and a leader. I mean, you don't think of goaltenders necessarily as leaders a lot, but Marty was always one to speak for his team. He was the face of the franchise for basically 20 years, and he was always the first to speak. Obviously, later in his career, he stopped speaking the morning of morning skates, but he ushered in this era where most every a lot of goaltenders speak the morning before they play games, and Marty kind of ushered that era in, and he was thoughtful, he was considerate, he might quip at your jokes, he might he might quip at your questions, he might hate your question, but he always would take the time to answer it, and he would always take the time to answer it thoughtfully, it seemed like no matter what the hockey topic it was, and I think that's. You mentioned his father, who was the photographer in the media, and I think it's emblematic. He understood what the media was trying to do, but also that we had a job to do. And as much as he might not like to have to answer the questions or face the press, it was always something he did, even after he was pulled in the Stadium Series. He might have made the press wait a little longer last year during the Stadium Series, but he was accountable, and he was always accountable and would answer the questions, even the ones he didn't like.
Absolutely, and now it becomes, when we look at his career for all that he accomplished, the gold medals, the Stanley Cups, probably should have had a Conn Smythe. A lot of people will argue that. That's for another day. But the question now becomes, where is his place in the Mount Rushmore of goaltenders? Is it there? People who will make the case that maybe Dominik Hasek was better, Patrick Waugh, but Pat, if you had to maybe not rank him in a definitive spot, but his legacy and what he did, where does he rank? Maybe not just in terms of goaltenders, but the entire NHL for the span of his career.
It's hard to say. Honestly, I'm pretty bad at at defining people's places as I've seen them. So take that with a grain of salt. I honestly consider Patrick Waugh the gold standard of goaltending, and for whatever that's worth. But that's where I lie. I think Brodeur is certainly in the conversation. Obviously, he was so much different of a goaltender than someone like a Dominic Hasek, who was this consummate battler who never gave up on plays, and who was basically. I mean, Brodeur was more the consistent day in day out walk of like the mailman sort of come in, come in, deliver your mail, win a bunch of games, and go about your business. I think Brodeur. I think I agree with you that Brodeur doesn't get the love. He certainly is I would say he's certainly the best goaltender of in a generation for sure. You mentioned it, and he's this transcendent figure, and I think you can't deny that. I don't whether he's the greatest goaltender to ever play the game or not. It's hard to say. I mean, like I said, Patrick Waugh ushered in an era of pure butterfly goaltending, which also changed the game. Whereas Marty changed the game a little bit differently in that that hybrid style. They're different goaltenders. He and Waugh and Hasek. But the fact that they're all in the same conversation, I think, just shows how spectacular those three guys who all played at the same time are. And I know Marty would be incredibly. I mean, I'm sure he thinks he's in that conversation as well. But for him to be considered with Patrick Waugh, who was his idol growing up, it must be just incredible for him if he would, take a step back and realize that. I think he's in the conversation, maybe a top 4, maybe on the Mount Rushmore, if you will. That's why I like the Mount Rushmore, is because it's hard to pick one, isn't it? I mean, because those guys are all different. And Hasek was so spectacular. He had such the ability to stand on his head. And Waugh was such the consummate stereotypical goaltender, only down to with the butterfly, who transcended the game with that style, but was such the fiery Quebecois. So I think Brodeur is in there with them, and I think just the consistency aspect of it, you can't sleep on it. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, but the fact that he has the most wins and the longevity, whether you want to call it compiling, whether you want to call it being the system goaltender, somebody had to do it, and to do it for that many years on successful teams for that many years, and to the fact that we're still talking about him when he's 42 years old, and he came in the league as a full-time starter at 21 years old. It basically tells you the story about Brodeur. What do you think? If you were going to compare those three, because the three I think are comparable in that they're all of the same era, whereas obviously Brodeur stayed the longest, but came in as the youngest also. You think you put him in that same conversation, though, Brodeur, Waugh?
Yeah, I almost think you have to look at all three of them evenly, and you might give the consistency nod to Brodeur for sure. I think you give the overall skill to Waugh, and then just the true determination, the grit to Hasek, because he would do whatever it took to make a save.
Yeah.
Where I think that to really say who's better, it's a team game, so even if you want to go stats-wise, to me there's still that aspect of it. I think they all belong right there. And I don't think it's a knock on any of them to say they all belong in that same group as far as the modern, to not so right now, but at least the guys who played within this era. And the goalies now, I don't think you can compare them because I don't think they're going to last very long. Henrik Lundqvist might get closer, but even a guy like Jonathan Quick, with his style, I don't think he's going to play into his late 30s. Maybe he'll make a fool out of me, but I don't think there's anyone out there now who has the ability to play the amount of games for the kind of seasons that Brodeur did and be that good.
I think the only one who is really in the conversation is Marc-Andre Fleury, just because he came in as such a young kid, just like Brodeur did. He came in as an 18-year-old and was in the NHL, shortly thereafter after being drafted. But I agree with you. But because you see, and it's also a different game You mentioned Quick, and Quick's had trouble with the physical aspect. He's had back surgery. He's had a bunch of surgeries. And you just see how hard it is to maintain and persevere. And I don't know what the reason behind that is. I mean, but for whatever reason, we talked about goaltending in an earlier show as it pertains to quarterbacks in the NFL. And Lou Lamoriello actually made that comparison to me yesterday or Tuesday. And in that, you have to look at the goaltender and you have to look at the quarterback as the guy, the face of the franchise. And I mean, there aren't too many guys, first off, period, Dave, that have had the longevity that Brodeur has had. So to expect a goaltender at any point in the future to have that career would be saying, that he's of that caliber. I mean, that's why Brodeur's in that conversation as some of the greatest of all time. To play those 22 years.
It's funny. Maybe he's not as much of a wild man, of course, but someone who comes to mind, if you want to make a football comparison, is Brett Favre, where you can't exactly say that. Because look, Brett Favre was not the kind of guy that was going to go out there. I mean, Marty was much more cerebral, but Favre just was able to, for years and years and years, go out and play at a high level. Where, look, even into his late 30s, 40s, Favre was doing it, and Brodeur was able to certainly play well into his late 30s. But overall, you look at his career, and whether or not you want to say he's the best, he certainly belongs on that list. If you want to say the, quote, Mount Rushmore of goaltending in the modern era, to me, there's no doubt that he belongs up there.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's denying that, and it's going to be. I mean, it was tough to watch him go out like that last year. Like I said, he showed us flashes even last year with some of the shutouts and the win in the finale. He always had that kind of flair for the dramatic, and it's even to watch him this year in a Blues uniform struggle at times. It still takes you back to the great moments in Marty Brodeur, whether it was scoring a goal, whether it was standing on his head, whether it was that incredible performance in the '09 playoffs. You remember Game 5, take you back to shutout. He pitched to get when he stood on his head there. I believe it was 45 saves in that game. But just the consistency, just the longevity of think about it. He was a 900 save percentage goaltender at 42 years old. If you want to just remove the fact that the number, but to be playing at 42 years old is one thing, but to be he was 3-3, but he didn't exactly embarrass himself in his last season, the last 7 games here. He wasn't looking like a fool. I mean, just the fact that St. Louis has better goaltending right now is one thing, but the Brodeur, he probably could still play, but maybe not that consistent level, and we really don't want to see him hang on for too long. I know I don't, and I think it's nice to see Marty decide that this is it, and
absolutely
make that announcement Thursday.
And you know what? He's going to have a front office job. I think he's a hockey lifer. As much as who knows, he could really decide that he's done with the game. I think he's certainly going to end up with the Devils, and he could be a GM for a while. Maybe it won't happen right away, but it's coming.
We'll see whether there's nepotism when it comes time to make a decision on Anthony Brodeur.
Yeah, we'll see about that one. That's for another day, though. But Pat, real quick, just before we wrap up here. Is there a save or a specific on the ice moment for you that really stands out?
I just mentioned the moment, the game against Carolina, the Game 5, I believe he 45 saves. I think just some of the enthusiastic moments that you remember. I mean, he made an incredible save in the '95 finals when he made a stop with his stick on the goal line. That always stands out. But it also, I think, the sheer enthusiasm of his goal in the '97 playoffs. I saw it on Twitter, the call come out, and if you just rewatch it, it's just to watch him get so excited and enthusiastic about, in that rarefied era of goaltenders who have scored goals, and in the playoffs, I think it's just him and Ron Hextall, if I'm not mistaken. But there were a ton of vintage Brodeur moments And then obviously being in attendance of the scoreless tie with him and Hasek was a special moment. But there were a lot of special moments. He created a lot of special moments for people in our area over a 20-year span, and he made a lot of childhood. He made people like us, Dave. He made us in tune with hockey, and I'm sure it was not just people in this area, but there were people who out there who love the Devils and love because of the uniform, because of the crest, but also because of Martin Brodeur. What about you, Dave? Anything stand out?
There's so many moments, but I think for me, the year after he had the biceps, during the year he had the bicep injury, where he came back against Colorado and won a 4-0 game. He had a shutout. There was something special about that because I think the fans, for the first time, started to feel like this is coming to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing him be able to rise to the occasion when he first came back and everything, to me that was a pretty cool one to be there for that. But obviously the Stanley Cup.
I think the 552 too when they beat the Blackhawks and he passed the all-time wins record was pretty special. Just because, like you said, because it was such a topsy-turvy season, that 08-09 season, and to watch him come back and first off tie the record in Montreal, and then break the record at home with the Blackhawks. Like I said, you said it too. There's a ton of memories. We could spend an hour talking about the saves and the memories and the growing up watching Marty Brodeur. But those are some for me.
Absolutely. All right, Pat. So again, we'll be back with our regular show early next week. This is just a little special edition here talking about the illustrious career of Martin Brodeur. All right, Pat, talk to you soon.
All right, Dave. Thanks a lot.